Hey guys, tonight we walk barefoot into history. Literally. You're standing at the edge of a trail that disappears into the horizon. Kicked up dust swirling around your ankles. The air thick with spice, sweat, and the sound of hooves. It's not just a trail. It's a web, a world. And you're about to walk straight into the tangled, fragrant, chaotic story of the Silk Road. But first, a quick reality check. You probably won't survive this. The Silk Road spans thousands of miles, crossing everything from deserts that melt your shoes to mountains that freeze your teeth. Bandits lurk. Water is rare. And your only company is a camel who thinks he's funnier than you. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening while winding down for bed, post your location and local time. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take your first step. The trail is hard and uneven. You hear the jingle of metal. Someone nearby is carrying coins. Somewhere farther down the road, you smell cinnamon. No one's baking. That's just commerce wafting through the air. Welcome to the Silk Road. It's not a single road, of course. That name's a modern convenience, coined in the 19th century. What you're actually stepping into is a shifting patchwork of routes. Some dusty, some lush, some underwater if you count the maritime branches. Spoiler, you will. Historians still argue whether the Silk Road was primarily for silk. Some say it was ideas that mattered more. Others say horses. One even swears it was fermented mare's milk. The truth? It was all of it, and more. Right now, you're moving west from Chang'an, the Tang dynasty's bustling capital. The city is behind you. Colorful banners, crowded tea stalls, poetry competitions in the alleys. Ahead, the wild. You walk past other travelers. A Sogdian merchant, face sunburnt and beard braided, leads a train of camels carrying bolts of raw silk. He nods at you. You nod back. It's a language everyone understands here. Your feet ache already, but the landscape keeps shifting. Rivers snake through valleys, poplars whisper in the wind, sand creeps across your path. You chew dried fruit from a pouch on your belt and try not to think about the scorpion that might still be in your sandal at a tea night. You sleep under stars you didn't know existed. The constellations are unfamiliar, but the sky feels trustworthy. Your camel makes noises like a grumbling old uncle. One morning, a trader offers you saffron for your wool cloak. You decline politely, but he insists. The cloak is too warm here, he says. Take the saffron. You'll smell richer. You walk into Dunhuang, an oasis town etched with Buddhist caves and dusty prayers. The walls glow with pigment, reds and golds faded by time but alive in lamplight. You trace a lotus with your finger and someone coughs behind you. You're not alone. Even here, there's music tonight. A soft reed flute echoing between clay walls. You don't understand the words of the song, but the emotion lands. It's about longing. It always is. The Silk Road doesn't just connect cities, it braids cultures. Languages blur. Scripts interweave. You hear Persian next to Chinese, Greek behind Sanskrit. Some people speak all four, and lie in every one. By now, your feet have toughened. You've traded boots for sandals, sandals for a pair of handmade felt shoes. They itch a little. The merchant who sold them said, they last long enough to forget who made them. You pass a convoy of Buddhist monks heading east, prayer wheels spinning slowly. One of them stops, points to your bag, and says, Turfin? You nod. Long walk, he replies. But the apricots are excellent. You laugh. He doesn't. You keep walking. As days blend into nights, you learn to spot danger in silhouettes and hospitality in firelight. A merchant from Samarkand teaches you how to tie a headscarf against sandstorms. A woman from Khotan shows you how to fold dumplings without losing filling. And every few miles, more silk. It rustles in crates. It drapes over merchant shoulders. It's stitched into banners that flutter from yurts. The road lives up to its name, but it never settles on one identity. You realize this journey isn't linear, it meanders, like a thread pulled through time, stitching worlds together. Somewhere outside a caravanserai, you sip fermented goat's milk from a wooden bowl and think, This is objectively terrible. But you drink the rest, because everyone around you is watching. And honestly, it's not worse than your first attempt at tang beer. Your camel tries to eat your tunic that night. You forgive him. And as the fire dies down and the stars return, you find yourself thinking not about the miles ahead, but the ideas. The religions, the myths, the fabrics, the foods, all riding along this road beside you. Some on wheels, some on tongues, some hidden in letters. You turn over, pull your felt blanket tighter, and try to sleep. But even now you hear whispers, echoes from traders, monks, envoys, and thieves. They all walked this road. They all changed it. And it changed them back. So will it change you? Maybe. You'll have to keep walking. You wake before dawn, the desert air still clinging to the chill of night. Your joints pop like old bamboo as you sit up. Your camel grunts, unimpressed by your existence. You brush off the sand in your hair, again, and begin packing. You're not alone. Nearby, a caravan is already stirring. Traders yawn and stretch, their silhouettes hazy in the early light. A boy is trying to catch a chicken. The chicken is winning. You shoulder your bag and step back onto the trail. Today, you learn something obvious but somehow still surprising. The Silk Road isn't really a road. There's no neat stone path, no carved signage pointing you west. Instead, you wander across a wide network, more like veins than a spine. Routes branch off, split again, disappear into hills or floodplains, only to reappear like magic in some distant town. Some paths run north through the steppe, where grass rolls for miles and the wind never stops shouting. Others carve through mountains sharp enough to slice clouds. And some sink into deserts, especially the Taklamakan, also known as the place where you go in and don't come out. Cheery? Historians still argue whether the Silk Road was ever truly one thing. Some call it a metaphor more than a route. But whatever it is, it works. Connects. You follow trails trodden by countless others: Persians, Uyghurs, Turks, Tibetans, Mongols, and the occasional fool with nothing but a prayer and a jar of pickled plums. Today, your feet take you to a fork in the trail. A Sogdian merchant sits nearby, chewing on dried apricots and staring at both paths. The left is quicker, he mutters. But it smells like goat. You ask about the right. Longer. Bandits. You choose goat. The path winds through cracked earth. You pass shrines made of stone piles, left behind by travelers hoping for luck. You add a rock of your own, partly out of respect, partly because everyone else is doing it and peer pressure transcends time. By midday, you reach an oasis village. Children play near a stream. Date palms wave lazily. You trade a coin for a fig, then another for shade. A woman selling incense asks if you've come from the east. You nod. She nods too, as if that explains everything. The Silk Road has no borders, but it's full of checkpoints. Not official ones, always. Sometimes it's a mountain pass controlled by a local warlord. Other times it's a nomadic tribe that demands gifts for passage. Today, it's a group of sheep with no respect for right-of-way. You wait. The sheep take their time. By late afternoon, you've joined another caravan. Better for safety and gossip. One trader is transporting peacock feathers for a Persian client. Another has a bag of rhino horn he swears cures melancholy. You ask if it works. Not for me, he says. But my camel hasn't cried once. Someone starts singing. The melody is unfamiliar but soothing. You hum along. The rhythm helps your legs forget how tired they are. The next stop. You hear whispers of war. A border conflict near Samarkand. You glance west. That's your direction. You sigh. The Silk Road doesn't promise peace, just motion. That night, you eat with the group. The stew is spicy, the bread is dry, and the conversation is rich. One old man tells a story about a tiger he outran on a trade route south of Kashmir. No one believes him, but everyone listens. You fall asleep to the sound of camels groaning and someone snoring through a blocked nose. In the morning, you break off from the group. Your path veers toward the mountains. The terrain rises. So does the wind. You wrap your cloak tighter. The trail narrows. Stones shift underfoot. This part of the journey is less about trade, more about trust. You pass cave dwellings, carved into cliffs like nests. A monk watches you pass, eyes calm as the sky. He raises a hand in blessing. You raise your hand in return. Feels enough. You cross a rickety bridge over a gorge. You do not look down. The road, if you can still call it that, leads to a narrow valley where travelers have left messages scratched into rocks. Some are names. Others are prayers. One just says, "Send better shoes." You agree. By nightfall, the air is thin, and your breath is louder than your thoughts. You boil water with a pebble and some herbs you don't recognize. The tea tastes like moss and disappointment, but it's hot. That's enough. As you curl under your cloak, you think of the path behind you. You've walked through languages you don't speak, customs you don't understand, and foods you probably weren't supposed to eat. But you're still here, still moving. The Silk Road isn't a road. It's a direction. A promise that wherever you go, someone's been there. Someone's waiting. You sleep under a blanket of cold stars and dream of flat terrain and soft sandals. You wake to frost on your blanket and the kind of cold that stabs before it whispers. Your breath fogs the air. Somewhere nearby, a camel sneezes and sounds deeply offended by existence. You stretch, shiver, and begin the slow ritual of convincing your legs to cooperate again. This morning, you're following the footsteps of a man who, centuries ago, started all of this without meaning to. His name was Zhang Qian, and he was an envoy of the Han dynasty. Sent west by Emperor Wu in the 2nd century BCE, Zhang's mission was simple in theory: find allies to fight the Xiongnu nomads. What he found instead was, well, the Silk Road. Historians still debate whether Zhang Qian was a trailblazer or just the guy who accidentally left the door open to half the planet. But what's clear is this: once he walked west, the world got a little more connected and a lot more complicated. You picture him now, tunic dusty, eyes narrowed against wind, possibly muttering something about really needing a better travel budget. He was captured early on by the Xiongnu and held for years. Escaped, kept going, found people who had never heard of China but were very interested in horses, jade, spices, and, of course, silk. And suddenly the Han court had options. They could imagine a world not just defended, but connected. You descend through a narrow pass, your boots slipping occasionally on gravel that might as well be marbles. The valley opens, and below, another caravan. Different faces, same mission. Goods, gossip, goals. You nod at a merchant leading donkeys packed with lacquer boxes and dried plums. His accent is strange to your ears, but his expression is universal. Don't ask me how long we've been walking. You fall in step. That night, gathered around a low fire in a circle of rocks, a younger trader leans in close and whispers, "You know the Han Emperor sent Zhang Qian just to find horses?" You raise an eyebrow. Not silk, not gold, horses. You chew your flatbread slowly. It's dry. But the idea is not. The Fergana horses, he tells you, were legendary. Big, strong, veins visible beneath the skin, like lightning-made flesh. The Chinese called them blood-sweating horses, which sounds terrifying until you realize they were probably just covered in parasites. Still, the reputation stuck. So Zhang Qian saw these horses in Bactria, returned to China, and basically said, "We need those. And also, there are cities out there. With wine." Wine? Suddenly the emperor was very interested, and thus began a series of increasingly ambitious expeditions westward, not only to trade goods but to map the edges of possibility. Your own journey now feels like a quieter echo of theirs. You arrive at a dusty village built from clay and dreams. Kids chase chickens. A man sells fermented mare's milk in tiny jars. You buy one. Sip. Regret it immediately. It tastes like someone pickled a goat in vinegar and forgot why. You try not to make a face. You fail. An old woman laughs. "You're not from around here." You smile. "No, just walking." She nods approvingly. "That's what the road is for." You walk to the edge of the village and stare out across the plateau. Ahead, the wind kicks up a river of dust. You wrap your scarf tighter. The trail leads toward Central Asia, toward stories older than borders and taller than mountains. You think again about Zhang Qian. How strange it must have felt to walk through foreign lands, knowing your name was a footnote to history and progress. And now, you follow his path. In your bag, you carry dried apricots, a bolt of coarse wool, and a little pouch of nutmeg you traded from a Persian man who swore it could cure headaches and heartbreak, though probably not both at once. You're not carrying history, but you're carrying echoes. That night, stars hang low like lanterns. A storyteller with a deep voice and wild hair recites a tale in a language you only half understand. Something about a horse that talks, a mountain that sings, and a river that eats coins. It doesn't matter if it's true, it matters that someone is telling it. Here, now. Because Zhang Qian didn't just open a route for goods. He cracked open a way for stories to move, for cultures to stretch out of their skin, for ideas to trade hands like spices. You close your eyes to the sound of flutes and fire, and somewhere, you imagine a horse with lightning veins galloping across the night sky, leading Zhang Qian toward a world bigger than he'd ever been promised. You sleep, knowing that tomorrow, the trail continues, not straighter, not safer, but always forward. The next morning greets you with a coughing fit from the dust, a lukewarm cup of something pretending to be tea, and the sight of your camel chewing on your scarf. Again, you're back on the road, feet crunching over gravel and sun-baked dirt. The wind whistles around your ears like it's trying to tell you secrets in a language lost to time. Today, you're thinking about horses. Not just any horses, Fergana horses. The kind Zhang Qian obsessed over. The kind that made emperors dream and treasuries shrink. You squint toward the horizon, imagining the beasts that once galloped over these plains. Strong, tall, fast, horses that sweat blood. Though modern scholars say it was likely a parasite. Less romantic, still gross. But back then, these creatures were status symbols, military assets, living myths. China wanted them, badly, and Fergana, modern-day Uzbekistan, had them. You hear it in the way people speak of them, reverent, like they weren't just animals but the key to empires. Silk was the hook, yes, but the bait? Horsepower. Historians still argue whether the Silk Road began because of silk or because of war horses. But one thing is clear, when you needed to defend your borders, a well-fed cavalry on blood-sweating steeds made all the difference. You reach a ridge. Below, nestled between two hills, is a market camp. Tents flap lazily. Smoke curls up from cooking fires. You smell cumin and roasting lamb. You descend. The camp bustles with the rhythm of trade. A man shouts about lapis lazuli from Badakhshan. Another shows off a Turkish saddle with too many buckles. A woman sells spices by the pinch, each heap carefully mounded like colored sand dunes. You trade a strip of wool for a pouch of almonds. They taste like someone roasted them near magic. Near the horse pens, a group of men argue. Loud, passionate, multilingual. You catch words like stamina, price, and doesn't bite anymore. One of the horses stamps its foot and glares like it knows it's being lowballed. You linger. A younger man notices you watching and grins. You want to try? You shake your head. I'd prefer not to die today. He laughs. Then don't ride that one. The Fergana horses were so prized that wars were fought for them. The Han even sent military campaigns to obtain them, something called the War of the Heavenly Horses. You wonder if the horses knew. Probably not, but their hooves echoed into history. You stroll along the edge of the market, past traders counting coin stacks and children kicking dust in purposeful circles. You overhear a story about a Persian scholar who tried to teach his camel Greek. It only learned one word, the storyteller says. No, as the sun drops lower, long shadows stretch over the valley. You share a meal with a merchant from Bactria who insists on telling you, with great seriousness, that donkeys are the real heroes of the Silk Road. They complain, yes, he says, but they walk, always. Camels lie down. Horses panic. Donkeys? Donkeys endure. You nod. It feels true. He offers you a bit of preserved fruit. You accept. It tastes like fig and dust and sugar. By nightfall, the horses are quieter. The pen's still, the trader's tired. You lie on your back, staring up at the stars. The wind pulls at the canvas overhead, as if trying to remind you of something ancient. You think of Zhang Qian again, of his journey westward, of the horses he saw and the empires that rippled out from his reports. He didn't set out to reshape trade routes. He just wanted allies. The Silk Road was the side effect, Sometimes the greatest historical shifts begin with a problem you were just trying to fix quickly. You close your eyes, the scent of animals, spice, and smoke lacing your dreams. You dream of horses that gleam like polished bronze, of messengers galloping across plains so fast the earth forgets its shape. And somewhere in that haze, you remember the first time you saw a bolt of silk, soft, strong, absurdly light, and how it whispered a promise. If I can make it here, I can make it anywhere. The road is still long. But now, you're not walking it alone. You leave the horse camp just after sunrise, your scarf newly damp from camel spit. Again, and your thoughts still full of hoofbeats and silk. The road curves southward now, winding through a landscape painted with sand, stone, and the occasional defiant patch of green. By midday, the heat hums against your skin like a song you can't turn off. Ahead lies a glimmer of comfort, an oasis town. You've been hearing about it for days. A place where trade routes intersect like threads in a tapestry, and where water isn't just wet. It's holy. You step into the edge of Khotan, where everything smells like dust, fruit, and a hint of sun-warmed fabric. Bazaars stretch in tight alleys. Doors carved with swirling vines hide shadowy courtyards. And from somewhere nearby, you hear laughter in a language you don't speak, but understand all the same. This is a Sogdian town. The people here are merchants, translators, cultural shapeshifters. They speak Chinese, Persian, Sanskrit, and can cheat you in all of them if you're not careful. Historians still debate whether the Sogdians were the Silk Road's true engine. Not warriors, not kings, but middlemen who traded stories as often as silk. It's hard to argue with that when you see their script carved into every dusty wall. You walk past a booth where a man sings verses from memory while balancing a tray of copper teacups. He gestures for you to sit. You do. The tea is hot, bitter, and served with candied rose petals. You weren't expecting to enjoy it. You do anyway. A young woman appears beside you. She sets down a sitar-like instrument, smiles, and begins to play. The music is slow, dreamy, gentle in a way that makes your shoulders unclench without permission. You glance around. The bazaar is alive. Pomegranates sliced open like rubies, silk bolts in indigo and gold, a man selling prayer beads that smell like pine, and above all this, the songs of traders. You hear a tale about a caravan leader who got lost in the dunes and survived 3 days by chewing on parchment maps. Another about a nobleman who paid for a horse with a single tear-shaped pearl. You don't know what's true. You don't need to. You leave the bazaar with a pouch of saffron, a coin carved with unfamiliar gods, and the faintest scent of cardamom clinging to your sleeve. Past the market, the houses give way to shrines, Buddhist stupas, Zoroastrian fire altars, even a small temple where a woman prays to a goddess who looks suspiciously like one from back home, just wearing different earrings. The Silk Road isn't just moving goods, it's moving gods. You step into a cool cavern carved into the rock. The walls are painted with murals, scenes of Buddha, bodhisattvas, and merchants offering gifts. A monk nearby paints quietly, dipping his brush into crushed lapis. You ask what the story is. He shrugs. All of them, he says. None of them. Depends who's looking. You sit in the cave's stillness. The world outside buzzes with trade. But in here, silence, and dust, and timelessness. As the day cools, you walk back through the town. You spot a Sogdian script carved into a stone bench. You can't read it. A boy nearby sees you looking. It says, "He who listens to many languages sleeps with many dreams." You smile. That sounds about right. You pass a musician playing a single-stringed fiddle, his face lost in thought. The note he hits feels like a memory of something you haven't lived yet. That night, you find a place to sleep in a shared guest house, a caravanserai. Stone walls, straw mats, a room that smells like old socks and triumph. In the courtyard, someone builds a small fire. You eat rice cooked in goat broth, topped with crushed pistachios. You share it with a man who tells you he's walked the Silk Road for 20 years and has never eaten the same stew twice. He asks where you're headed. You pause. West, you say. Wherever west is now. He nods. It moves. You'll chase it anyway. You sleep under a carved ceiling painted with stars and birds, your thoughts tangled with melodies and spice. The Silk Road doesn't just change maps, it changes minds. You leave the oasis town before the sun has fully climbed the sky. The streets are quiet, save for the muffled footsteps of other early risers and the rhythmic clink of a merchant's coin pouch. Somewhere behind you, someone sneezes, and a rooster makes a sound like it's laughing. You're back on the trail again. Your pack is heavier now. Saffron, almonds, a folded strip of embroidered silk, and more questions than answers. Today, your pace slows. You've joined a caravan again. This one longer and louder than the last. Dozens of camels, their sides covered in patched blankets, snort and jostle each other like grumpy uncles. You walk beside a trader from Balk who insists his camels are smarter than most men. One of them solved a riddle once, he says proudly. Even I didn't get it. You nod politely and try not to trip over a camel's tail. The Silk Road isn't glamorous. Not really. It's long, dusty, relentless, but also weirdly organized. That's what you're learning now. This route runs on systems. There's etiquette. There's currency. There's a method to the slow, clunky chaos. You pause to examine a set of coins one merchant is passing around. Roman denarii, Kushan gold staters, Tang bronze cash, and one strange silver disc stamped with what looks like a lion wearing a crown. Historians still argue how money worked out here. Some say barter ruled everything. Others point to the sheer variety of coins dug up along the route, from Italian mints to Indian punch-marked pieces, as proof that money traveled like gossip. Far and fast, with details slightly warped. One thing is clear. On the Silk Road, a coin didn't have to make sense. It just had to be trusted. A boy walks past juggling apricots. A girl follows him holding a tray of incense. You buy a cone of ambergris and regret it immediately. It smells like someone lit a candle made from sea monsters and regret. You cough. The girl laughs. You smile. It's fair. By late morning. The caravan stops at a dusty checkpoint. A man in a red sash and a gold earring waves you through but asks, "What are you carrying?" You say, "Not much." He nods, eyes twinkling. That's what they all say. You hand him a few coins, more out of tradition than necessity. Everyone gets a cut here, gatekeepers, guides, gods. The road continues. You pass a line of salt traders, their camels loaded with white blocks that glint under the sun like treasure. They walk in silence, eyes shaded, footsteps patient. Salt might not sparkle like silk, but it keeps people alive. You cross a bridge made of planks and prayer, spanning a gorge that hums with wind. Below, nothing. Above, a hawk circling lazily. You keep your gaze forward. Don't look down. At the next stop, a man offers you a coin the size of a walnut. It's heavy, uneven, and marked with a dragon chasing its tail. Found it in a well, he says. Some say it's lucky. You trade him a handful of saffron. Why not? Luck might be worth more than flavor out here. By late afternoon. You're resting under a poplar tree, chewing dried apple slices and watching a young boy practice balancing a basket on his head. He falls, tries again, grins every time. You think about how much has to move to keep the Silk Road alive. Goods, yes, but also knowledge, words, habits, trust. The Tang used silk as currency, bolts wrapped and sealed like scrolls. In other places, it was cowrie shells. In some, tea. You wonder how many forms of value one road can carry before it collapses under its own richness. You nap briefly. The dust settles. Somewhere nearby, someone starts singing again. It's the same song from 3 camps ago, but in a different key. You hum along. This version feels sadder as twilight falls. You pass through another caravanserai, a stone compound built for rest, protection, and stories. You recognize some faces now. Familiar nods. Shared food. A sense of rhythm. Tonight's stew is lentil-heavy and aggressively spiced. You burn your tongue and pretend not to notice. Across the courtyard, a man starts telling a story about a caravan cursed by a god of trade. The punchline? The curse was eternal discounts. Everyone laughs. You settle into your sleeping mat, the walls around you still buzzing with the soft clatter of pots, whispers, and coins being counted in corners. Tomorrow you'll walk again, and maybe you'll find another coin. Maybe you'll trade it for almonds. Or for a story. Or for nothing at all. Because sometimes, the road pays you in moments. You awaken to the sound of clanking metal and camels grumbling like hungover innkeepers. The caravanserai is already thinning out. Traders repack crates, boys chase stray goats, and a woman is loudly insisting her dried figs were overweighed. You stretch and feel everything pop. You're back on your feet before your thoughts are. Another day on the Silk Road. The dust is immediate. Clings to your skin, your teeth, your soul. You chew a strip of jerky that may or may not have once been goat. Possibly shoe. Hard to tell. Today is about risk. You're entering a stretch known not for its sights, but for its shakedowns, bandits, bribes, border checks, the unofficial part of the Silk Road economy. This is where your coin pouch suddenly becomes more important than your map, and your ability to smile politely might just keep your ears attached. You've barely gone an hour before the caravan stops. Up ahead, a narrow canyon, the perfect place for someone to make your day worse. Out from behind a boulder steps a man with a sword that's more rust than blade. He's wearing mismatched armor and a grin like he just found a new tax bracket. You're being inspected. The caravan leader sighs and steps forward, flipping a coin high into the air. The bandit catches it, bites it, because apparently that's still a thing, and waves everyone through with a flourish. You exhale. Crisis cost. 1 silver. Historians still debate how much control empires really had over these trade routes. Officially, the Tang, Kushan, or Abbasids might have laid claim to these lands. Unofficially, local warlords, bandit crews, and opportunistic toll collectors ran things on the ground. You learn quickly. Caravan security is both a necessity and a negotiation. You pass a burned-out outpost, its walls blackened, its gates broken. Used to be a checkpoint, someone says, until someone didn't pay fast enough. You don't ask for more details. Later, a rider gallops past, scattering pebbles and curses. He wears no insignia, carries no trade goods, just speed and a sword. A scout? A courier? A fool? Probably all three. You keep walking. That afternoon, you encounter a more formal border, a checkpoint manned by guards in teal tunics trimmed with fur. They look bored but alert. One leans on a spear. Another is rolling dice on a crate. The leader inspects your satchel. You smile, offer him a pouch of almonds. He takes 3, chews slowly, nods, and waves you on. Apparently, almonds are diplomatic currency now. A woman behind you isn't so lucky. Her spice pouches are confiscated. Too valuable, the guard says. National security. He sneezes. Cinnamon drifts through the air. You catch up to the caravan. Someone jokes that taxation is the world's oldest profession. Someone else counters, no, the second oldest, but it's better at paperwork. You laugh, but you also tighten your belt pouch. That evening, you reach a river crossing. A rickety ferry is pulled across by a man with shoulders like granite and a voice like gravel. He charges you double for looking like you can afford it. You pay. You do not argue. Halfway across, the ferry creaks alarmingly. You grip the edge, wondering if this is how you die. Sunk by sarcasm and splinters. But you make it. Across the river, the terrain softens. Trees return. The air smells faintly of flowers and livestock. You pass a village market, hastily set up with cloth awnings and crooked stalls. Children dart between baskets of fruit and bowls of dried shrimp. A young girl offers you a pastry with unknown filling. You hesitate. She smiles. You take it. It's delicious. Possibly plum. Possibly mystery. You rest that night near a temple carved into stone, its steps worn smooth by centuries of tired feet. A monk offers you tea and silence. You take both. As you sip, you stare at the sky. Stars blink overhead. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks at nothing. A camel answers. You think about borders. About how the Silk Road doesn't stop at gates or checkpoints, it flows through them. Like water through cracks. Like stories through mouths. You remember the bandit with the too big sword, the almond-bribed guards, the ferry crook. And you realize, even chaos has its rituals. You roll onto your mat, the stones still warm beneath your blanket. The road may not always be safe, but it's always moving. You wake to birdsong and the faint scent of incense from the temple's early morning rituals. A monk sweeps the courtyard with a straw broom, moving slowly, methodically, like he's brushing yesterday off the earth. You stretch, yawn, and nod in gratitude as you pack your bag. The Silk Road calls again. Today you're chasing silk itself. Not metaphorical silk, not legend-inviting silk, but real, shimmering, spool-wrapped Chinese silk that has made its way far west of the looms where it was born. You pass a man leading a donkey loaded with bolts of fabric. One shimmers purple, catching the sunlight like it's been woven from light itself. For Rome, he says, if it survives the journey. You raise an eyebrow. The donkey farts. You both nod solemnly. You walk through flatlands now, with the sun playing hide-and-seek behind clouds. The road here is busier. More traders, more carts, more languages. A pair of women in bright saffron robes giggle as they pass you, whispering something about your boots. You suspect it's not a compliment. But then you hear it. Someone in a shaded tent is talking about silk arriving in Caesar's Rome. Now you're paying attention. You step inside. It's a gathering place. Half tea house, half marketplace, all gossip. A bearded man in a Persian coat gestures wildly. They wore it without knowing how it was made. They thought it grew on trees. Historians still argue how the Romans understood silk. Some believed it was combed from tree bark. Others thought it was gathered like wool. They loved it, yes, but its origin remained a fog-wrapped mystery. You sip from a shared teacup. The flavor is somewhere between jasmine and regret. Across the room, a Roman coin clinks against a Tang dynasty weight. Silk didn't just travel across the Silk Road. It reshaped economies. You imagine the scene. A Roman senator adjusting his sheer silk toga, scandalizing the streets with every breeze. Roman laws were eventually passed to limit silk use, especially among men. It was too revealing, too luxurious, too Eastern. But demand never stopped, and so the road kept humming. You walk again. Past a tent where a merchant is dyeing silk with crushed beetles and boiled leaves. The smell is robust. The colors are stunning. Crimsons, sapphires, and a deep green that looks like envy turned liquid. You run your fingers across a finished piece. It slips under your touch like water. No wonder it mesmerized emperors. Someone offers to sell it to you for a small pouch of nutmeg and your left shoe. You decline. Reluctantly. As you keep walking, you notice camel bells. They're soft at first, like wind chimes in a dream, but they grow louder with each step. Another caravan approaches, massive. Over 100 animals. Crates labeled in multiple scripts. Banners from Parthia and Khotan. Guards with curved swords and dusty grins. You step aside as they pass. One camel eyes your pack like it wants a trade. You stare it down. It blinks slowly. At midday. You stop in a shaded grove. Someone passes around flatbread rolled with dried apricot paste and crushed pistachios. You take a bite and nearly propose marriage to the chef. You settle for a grateful grunt. You ask about the silk again. Where does it go? The chef shrugs. To the rich, the powerful, the ones who think luxury is armor. You chew quietly. That night, you find yourself camped beside a stream. The stars shimmer overhead, reflected in the still water. You listen to a story about a Roman general who wore a silk robe into battle. He thought it would make him glow, the storyteller says. The arrows disagreed. Laughter ripples through the group. Silk wasn't just beautiful. It was dangerous. Could bankrupt a household. Could lure thieves. Could betray you on a battlefield. But still, people wanted it. Even now, lying on a mat beneath the stars, you find yourself wondering how far this fabric has traveled. How many hands touched it? How many lives changed because of it? You close your eyes and dream of distant cities lit with oil lamps, of marble statues wrapped in fabric made by hands you'll never meet, of a thread that never breaks, only bends, east to west, shimmer to shadow. You dream in silk. You leave the silk camp before the sun has fully risen. The sky still painted in soft blues and peachy grays. The road is quieter now, less commerce, more reflection. The early air smells faintly of dew. dust, and smoke from a breakfast fire you didn't start but deeply appreciate as you walk. A familiar scent wafts into the air. Something sweet, something spiced. You follow it, instinct pulling you like a compass. Around a bend, tucked between hills, you find it. A small caravan preparing for departure. Their cargo? Spices. So many spices your nose goes into joyful overdrive. A man in a long teal robe is overseeing the loading process. He waves you over and opens a cloth bundle. Inside, cardamom pods, cloves, cinnamon sticks bound in twine, and a small pile of nutmeg that glitters like secrets. He lets you inhale deeply. India, he says with a knowing smile. You ever been? You haven't, yet. But the scent alone feels like an invitation. He points down a path that splits from your own. That way, he says. 3 weeks, maybe 4. If your feet don't betray you. You pause. You were going west. But your feet twitch. And so you follow the spice trail southward. The terrain shifts. Greener, wetter. You cross narrow bridges made of roots. Past villages where everyone smiles like they've heard the joke before you told it. The road narrows and rises, twists and folds. Rain falls lightly some afternoons, not enough to soak you, just enough to remind you who's in charge. You share food with Buddhist monks traveling east. They offer you a rice cake wrapped in leaves. You offer them almonds. One of them laughs. Same taste, he says, just different robes. At a high pass, you stop for air. The wind carries chants from a nearby temple and the thick perfume of jasmine and wood smoke. You think about India, not as a country, not even as a destination, but as an idea. A source of spices, of math, of medicine, of religion. So many threads of the Silk Road begin, or at least shimmer, here. Historians still argue whether Indian traders were the heart of the spice trade or merely its lungs. But everyone agrees. India inhaled and exhaled influence along the Silk Road like incense in a crowded shrine. You reach a bustling city. Not massive, but dense. Courtyards layered in bright saris hung to dry. Boys selling crushed mango ice in ceramic bowls. Scribes copying texts in Sanskrit, Pali, Arabic, and something you can't identify. You follow a crowd to a temple complex carved directly into the cliffs. Elephants are etched into the stone. Bells chime faintly in the breeze. Inside, a small shop sells tiny packets of saffron, turmeric, and dried rose petals wrapped in palm leaves. You buy one. You don't know why. It feels like the right thing to do. Later, you find a place to sit and rest, beneath a banyan tree heavy with vines and crows. A man nearby speaks slowly to a crowd of listeners. You don't understand the language, but the rhythm is enough. A trader beside you whispers. He's telling the story of the bodhisattva who gave away his body to feed a starving tigress. He shrugs. Kindness doesn't pay well, but it travels far. The story sticks with you. So does the scent of masala rice that someone passes you wrapped in banana leaf. You burn your tongue. You regret nothing. That night, you lie on a flat stone warmed by the day's sun. The city buzzes below, but up here, it's quiet. You trace the constellations again, some now familiar from nights across mountains and deserts. You realize something strange. This part of the road doesn't just trade silk or horses or spices. It trades taste, texture, intuition. You've eaten foods your ancestors couldn't name, and now you crave them like they were always part of you. The Silk Road hasn't just connected places. It's flavored humanity. And somewhere in that flavor, cardamom, cinnamon, mango, you realize that you don't always need to reach a destination to feel like you've arrived. You wake beneath the banyan tree, the air thick with birdsong and the smell of something frying in ghee. Your limbs creak as you sit up, brushing crumbs and a curious beetle from your robe. Around you, the city murmurs awake, a slow rising tide of sound. Bells ringing, pots clanging, goats arguing over breakfast. You rejoin the road. Not the silk trail now, but the pilgrim's path, which overlaps, twists, and sometimes forgets it's not the main route. Because today isn't about trade goods. It's about belief. You're walking with monks, their heads shaved smooth, their sandals whispering against the dust. They move in small groups, sometimes chanting, sometimes silent. Their robes ripple like waves in saffron, ochre, and faded crimson. Their pace is unhurried. measured, like they already know where they're going, even if it takes a lifetime to get there. And somehow you follow, you pass villages where people kneel to offer fruit and rice to the monks. In return, they receive nothing. No blessing, no trinket, just the chance to give. You watch one monk accept a single mango, bow deeply, and walk away. No words, just presence. That's when it hits you. The Silk Road didn't just carry goods and money, it carried gods. And Buddhism? It traveled on foot, one bowl at a time. Historians still debate which came first, the trade routes or the spread of Buddhist doctrine. Did merchants convert to fit in with monks? Or did monks follow the merchants? Knowing where people gather, stories bloom. No one agrees. And that's okay. What's undeniable is this. The Silk Road became a superhighway of spirituality. And Buddhism had the smoothest sandals. By midday, you reach a cave complex carved into a cliff face. Inside, murals so vivid they feel alive. Scenes from the Buddha's life. Faces of donors painted beside gods. A merchant family kneeling before a golden lotus. One monk gently touches a painted eye and whispers something you can't hear. You light a butter lamp and sit in the stillness. The cave smells like age and ash. Dust floats in the shafts of light cutting through cracks in the stone. You breathe slowly. Try to match their rhythm. Outside again, a novice monk hands you a folded slip of paper. You open it. There's a verse written in curling brushstrokes. As silk threads bind without weight, so do thoughts travel without trace. You nod. Thank him. He's already walking away. That evening, you stop at a monastery perched at the edge of a ravine. Its walls are made from pressed mud and hope. Inside, the hall is filled with low chanting, deep, resonant, oddly comforting. You join the meal. Simple lentils, rice, boiled greens. A brass bowl of water. No spices, no conversation, just the quiet clinking of spoons. After dinner, a senior monk tells a story, not loudly, but everyone hears. He speaks of a man who carried a single scroll from India to China. Took him 9 years. He lost everything else, food, shoes, teeth, but protected the scroll with his life. And when he delivered it, he was thanked with a small bronze statue in silence. No crowds, the monk says, just a fire, and someone who listened. You sit with that thought as the night thickens. Because that's the thing, isn't it? The Silk Road wasn't always loud. It was often soft, quiet moments, shared stories, muted devotion, a scroll hidden in cloth, a prayer whispered between bites of bread. You sleep on a mat near the altar, your dreams full of glowing lotuses and walking gods. In the morning, before the sun fully climbs, you're back on the road. No trade today. Just a lighter step, and the feeling that something unseen is walking just ahead. You leave the monastery with a mind quieter than usual. Your footsteps land softer. Even your camel seems more contemplative this morning, chewing with a kind of enlightened slowness. Maybe it's the incense still clinging to your robes. Maybe it's the tea. Maybe it's the road reshaping you while you're too tired to resist. Today, it's not monks or horses or silk on your mind. It's objects. Things so ordinary they should have been forgotten. But somehow they weren't. You're thinking about glass, ink, and, of all things, spices you can't pronounce, because for all the thunderous legends of the Silk Road, much of it comes down to small exchanges. Little items tucked into pouches. Traded quietly. Carried far. You pass a cart stacked high with rolled parchment and leather-bound bundles. A scribe huddles beside it, staining fingers with carbon ink, the kind that smells like burnt almond shells and smoke. He's transcribing a Persian poem into Syriac script. You pause to watch. He glances up. Want a line? He asks. You shrug. He chooses a phrase, dabs it onto a sliver of parchment, and presses it into your palm. It reads, "Where words travel, walls collapse." You nod. Add it to your bag. You'll probably forget it's there, until you don't. Further along the trail, you encounter a merchant hunched beneath the weight of glass beads. Dozens of them, knotted into ropes and looped like candy around wooden rods. He gestures proudly. Alexandria. You blink. That far? He grins. Not far if you walk slowly enough. Historians still argue how far Roman glass traveled east. Some claim it reached Korea. Others say that Chinese glassworkers picked up the craft directly from Central Asian artisans. No consensus, just fragments found in tombs like breadcrumbs left by restless hands. But here you are, holding a green bead that might have once sparkled in a Caesar's shadow, or hung around the neck of a woman in Samarkand who told fortunes using mirrors you buy 3. For no reason. That's how this road works. Midday. You rest beneath a weathered tree with bark that peels like dried papyrus. A vendor beside you lays out his goods on a frayed rug. Cinnamon bark, frankincense resin, a pinch of something purple he calls dream spice. You're skeptical, but intrigued. He points at the cinnamon. India, the resin. Yemen, the purple stuff. Nightmares, probably. You buy the cinnamon. The nightmares are tempting, but not today. Later, as the sun dips lower, you join a group of traders sharing ink recipes. One uses soot and water, another uses gallnuts and vinegar. One whispers about mixing wine into the ink for clarity. Not your writing, he says. Your thinking. A young woman shows off a roll of silk printed with tiny block letters using a carved wooden stamp. She calls it a message robe worn not for beauty, but for memorization. You touch the fabric gently. The ink has bled into the threads like secrets that don't want to stay hidden. That evening, in a village square lit by lanterns carved from gourds, you watch a performer draw a map onto a cloth using crushed beet pigment. It's crude, but the symbols are familiar. Rivers, cities, mountains. One of them is where you are now. He outlines a spot farther west with a flourish. There, he says, you can buy spices you'll never afford and ink that disappears after reading. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. That's the rumor. Stories, like ink, fade if they're not shared. The night wraps around you like smoke. You sit beside the fire with your knees tucked in, the cinnamon pouch in your lap, the glass beads in your palm. You think of the hands that pass these things along. Not generals or kings, just people. Tired, sunburnt, and stubborn. You lie back on the cool stone, gazing at stars like tiny drops of spilled ink on parchment. And somewhere, gently, the wind rustles a whisper. Even the smallest objects can reshape the world. You wake to a dry wind and the long, low groan of a camel that clearly doesn't respect mornings. The trail today leads into desert country, and your water pouch already feels like a lie. The sun isn't even up, and the sand is warm. Like the earth is preheating you for something dramatic. Today's journey is about illusions. Or maybe miracles. Because as you trudge along a narrow path flanked by dune and emptiness, your eyes start to play tricks on you. You swear you see buildings, rooftops glinting, flags waving, fountains spraying water into the air like some desert deity is throwing a pool party. But of course, it's not there. Welcome to the Silk Road's greatest joke. Mirages. Historians still argue how many ancient towns were inspired or invented by desperate travelers seeing what they wanted to see. Some of those mirage cities were real. Others, just heat and hope. But every caravan has a story about someone chasing an oasis only to find more sand, and maybe a very smug goat. You sip sparingly from your water pouch and adjust your scarf. The road wavers like a ribbon unraveling in the heat. And then, just when you're ready to lie down and negotiate your final wishes with the sky, a real city appears. Merv.it rises like a mirage that forgot to disappear. Walls of mud brick and stone, tents layered with silks, stalls overflowing with dried fruits, bronze tools, ink pots, and camel bells so finely tuned they sound like wind chimes when they jingle. Merv is old, older than forgetting, and yet alive. Bustling. You hear at least 6 languages within 5 steps. You get bumped by someone selling rugs, offered soap made from goat fat and rose petals, and nearly stepped on by a donkey hauling 2 crates of walnuts. You step into the shade of a stall where a man fans himself with a Persian manuscript page. He's selling dried dates and cold water. You would pay him your last coin for either. He accepts one of your glass beads instead. Merv is more than a town. It's a hub, a node in the silk and spice constellation. You see traders from China, Byzantium, India, and the Arab world all sharing tea and arguing about interest rates in a mix of tongues that somehow makes perfect sense when accompanied by hand gestures and the occasional exasperated shrug. You pass a Zoroastrian fire temple, the air tinged with wood smoke and saffron. A group of travelers kneel in silence, hands raised toward the flame. Nearby, someone sells gold-threaded amulets, claiming they've been blessed by at least 3 gods and possibly a lucky bird. You buy one. Just in case. By late afternoon, the heat softens. A Sogdian poet sets up in a corner, reciting verses while plucking a stringed instrument. Children dance nearby. A goat joins in, uninvited. The poet sings of a merchant who chased a city he dreamed of, and when he finally found it, it was smaller than his expectations but just as full of stars. You sit under a faded awning, sipping goat milk and listening. You think of all the places you've imagined along this road, and how some of them turned out to be true, or truer than truth. Because here's the thing about the Silk Road. It's full of cities that feel imaginary until you're inside them, and some mirages are real enough to matter. You buy a length of dyed linen to wrap around your shoulders. The merchant says it'll keep ghosts away. You believe him a little more than you should. That night, you sleep on a rooftop under a sky so wide it feels like you could fall upward into it. You dream of cities that flicker, appearing only when you're too tired to look, but always there, waiting. You dream of maps that redraw themselves in your sleep, of fire temples and rug sellers and goats with dance aspirations. You dream of the road, stretching endlessly, always shimmering, never promising, only suggesting, and you wake with the memory of one truth. The most incredible places often begin as illusions, and the Silk Road is full of those. You wake with sun on your face and sand in your teeth. Not metaphorical sand. Actual, literal, gritty sand that makes you wonder if you were trying to eat your pillow in your sleep. You sit up slowly, stretching limbs that feel older than you remember. Merv is already buzzing. The smell of lentil stew and burning incense drifts up from the streets below. You pack your things, shake the sand out of your hair, and begin your descent. Today, the trail is headed deeper into Persian territory. And with it comes one of the Silk Road's most unexpected passengers. Christian bishops in yurts. Yes, you're entering the world of Nestorianism. You pass through smaller towns along the way, each a patchwork of mud brick homes, clay ovens, and wall paintings faded by sun and sermons. One town has a chapel. Not a mosque, not a stupa, a Christian chapel. Crosses carved into the walls, a Greek inscription above the door. It throws you off for a second. The priest greets you in Persian and offers you figs. Welcome to the Church of the East. Nestorian Christians made their way along the Silk Road like everyone else, quiet, determined, fluent in barter and blessings. They brought texts, rituals, and hymns, and apparently a deep fondness for Persian carpets. Historians still argue how far Nestorian Christianity spread. Some claim it reached China's Tang court. Others argue that by the 9th century, there were more bishops east of Baghdad than west of Rome. You shrug. All you know is, their churches are cozy, their wine surprisingly strong, and their scrolls smell like cinnamon. You follow a small procession leaving town. 2 monks, a merchant, and a child carrying a bundle of scrolls tied with wool string. They walk without haste, like the message can wait, but the movement can't stop. That afternoon, you reach a carpet market. And there it is, Persia's second great export. The rug that could buy you a house or hide your shame, or both. The merchant unrolls a carpet woven in geometric blues and reds so vivid it feels like staring into a puzzle. You don't need one. You can't afford one. You buy a postcard-sized offcut and feel like royalty. He tells you each pattern is a prayer, each knot a whisper. They take years, he says, and then we walk on them. The irony lands like a feather, or a camel hoof. You sit beneath a date palm sipping sweet tea with a Nestorian monk who's carrying a Greek manuscript. He's copied it himself, by hand, by candlelight, by willpower alone. What's it say? You ask. He shrugs. Something about love, and loss, and trade, probably. The Silk Road is full of contradictions like this. Monks carrying luxury rugs, merchants quoting scripture, priests who know 6 currencies but still think heaven doesn't accept coins. You pass through a Persian caravanserai, its arches wide, its interior cool and dark. Travelers rest on layered cushions. Stories unfold over stew. One man tells of a town made entirely of mirrors. Another claims he saw a phoenix flying over the Hindu Kush. You nod politely. This road blurs belief and geography until they're indistinguishable. At nightfall, the air turns sharp and clean. You sleep in a tent shared with a Persian family and a bishop who snores like a thundercloud. As you drift off, you notice the cross stitched into the bishop's robe and the rug beneath your feet bearing a Zoroastrian sunburst. You smile. Here, faiths don't compete. They cohabitate. Not always peacefully, but often enough. Because on the Silk Road, everyone's a stranger until you trade something. And then, suddenly, you're a guest. You close your eyes, the rug soft beneath you, the stars blinking overhead like a language only the road can read, and you dream of scrolls that sing, of bishops in yurts, and of prayers whispered into thread. Because faith, like silk, travels best when folded carefully and shared freely. You wake wrapped in 2 layers of wool, 1 Persian rug, and at least 1 child's arm across your chest. You gently extricate yourself and sit up, groggy, blinking at the morning light filtering through woven tent flaps. Outside, the camp is already stirring. Someone is boiling tea. A rooster announces its existence without shame. And over the smell of goat stew and wood smoke, another scent rides the wind, ink. Today, you're headed into the world of paper. You pack your things and follow the trail through narrow gullies and over weathered hills. Around midday, the road curves, and there it is, a city of white walls and tiled rooftops gleaming under a sun so bright it could write its own biography. You're in Samarkand now. If the Silk Road had a capital of ideas, it might be this city. Here, merchants sell poetry in scrolls, equations in ink, and sometimes rumors wrapped in riddles. Here, the most valuable thing isn't spice or silk. It's paper. You find a workshop tucked behind a fig orchard. Inside, men stir pulp vats, stretch fibers on bamboo frames, and hang sheets to dry like prayers. The air smells faintly of boiled rags and progress. One man waves you over and hands you a damp sheet. Tang Dynasty formula, he says proudly. Stolen fair and square. You blink. He grins. From the Chinese. Long ago. Took us a century to perfect. Historians still argue how exactly papermaking traveled west, whether through prisoners of war, enterprising monks, or careless spies. But what's known is this: when paper arrived, the world tilted. In Samarkand, it became cheaper, thinner, faster. It turned cities into libraries, traders into scribes, and religion into reproducible ideology. You walk through the market and spot books laid out like fruit. Some are Qurans written in golden Kufic script. Others are Persian poems with margins so ornate they look like gardens. One scroll contains a shopping list from 3 dynasties ago. It includes cumin, ink, and shoes. You relate deeply to that person. A boy hawks bamboo pens beside inkstones. You buy one, though you haven't written anything but footprints for weeks. In a shaded square, a group of scholars debates loudly over a diagram of the stars. You catch words like algebra and Zij tables, and you copied my diagram. The crowd laughs. You join them. For a moment, you forget you're a traveler. You're just another body soaking up ideas. You visit a scribe's library, where a girl no older than 12 is copying a Persian love poem by lamplight. You compliment her script. She doesn't look up. I'm faster than my brother, she says flatly. You believe her. Outside, a man plays a reed flute beside stacks of bound scrolls. The melody coils through the air like calligraphy in motion. Someone claps. Someone else throws a figure. You sit beneath an awning and eat rice cakes dusted with powdered cardamom, watching as letters change hands faster than coins. That night, you stay in a home lined with shelves, scrolls and bound volumes, leaflets and notes tucked into cracks. Your host offers you tea and a riddle. What can carry words farther than the fastest camel? You think for a moment. Paper. He smiles. No, a bored scribe. You both laugh. Then he hands you a small scroll. Take it, he says. We give away what's worth reading. You unroll it later. It's a poem. Simple. Beautiful. A single stanza. I cannot carry silk or stone, nor walk from sea to sea. But open me, and you have flown where only thought can be. You tuck it into your bag. The stars are soft tonight. No sharp edges. Just ink blots on velvet. You lie on your mat and realize the Silk Road isn't just a route for goods or gods or even goats. It's a highway of ideas. And sometimes all it takes to change the world is one page in the right hands. You wake in a room full of books and the gentle creak of wood beams settling with the morning. Outside, the air is cooler today, dry and crisp, with the faint scent of figs and distant smoke. You stretch, you think of scrolls, and you think of what happens when paper meets power. Because today you're heading west again toward Byzantium. Or, more accurately, toward Constantinople. The great hinge between east and west, where silk meets steel, where stories change languages, names, and sometimes purposes. You join a caravan heavy with textiles, dried fruits, and silver jewelry wrapped in wool. Everyone walks briskly. Rumors of war? Bandits? Taxes? It's unclear. But there's a shared urgency, like the whole road is exhaling. The terrain flattens as you near the western edge of the great trade web. Dust turns to soil. Spice turns to coin. You begin to see more Greek script on signs, more crosses carved into stone, and then, after days of walking, bartering, laughing, blistering, and wondering, you arrive, Constantinople, the queen of cities, a sprawl of marble, mosaics, basilicas, palaces, market stalls, harbor cranes, and 1,000 other smells, sounds, and sights all stitched together like a robe that never stops fluttering, and in the midst of it, silk. Silk here isn't just worn, it's weaponized. You pass shops lined with robes so luminous they reflect the sun. You spot imperial guards wearing silk under their armor. A priest steps into a chapel trailing blue silk embroidered with tiny gold crosses. You hear a vendor call out, "Silk from the emperor's own worms." You pause. That's new. Because here's the thing, Byzantium stole the recipe. Historians still argue whether it was monks smuggling silkworm eggs in their staffs or imperial agents bribing Chinese workers. Either way, sometime in the 6th century, Byzantine silk production began, and the world changed again. You visit a weaving house where a woman threads gold wire through dyed silk so fine it whispers when touched. She explains the pattern: lions, eagles, olive branches. For a wedding, she says. Important family. You don't ask how important. You nod like you've seen it all before in the Grand Bazaar. You see it all. Egyptian linen, Arabian perfumes, Venetian glass, Greek olive oil, and silk. So much silk. Folded, hung, pleated, draped, and occasionally tangled by overenthusiastic shoppers. You buy a handkerchief. You don't need it. You don't even like the color. But it feels like proof that you made it. You step into the courtyard of the Hagia Sophia, where sunlight pours through stained glass and pigeons gossip from ledges. You sit on a marble bench. Breathe. A man beside you in Armenian garb fans himself with a folded manuscript. He asks where you've come from. You pause. How do you answer that? From everywhere. You say, from the east. He nods like that makes perfect sense. As the sun dips behind tiled rooftops, you walk along the harbor walls. The ships are loaded with bales of silk, sacks of pepper, crates of paper, and gossip. Everything here moves. Even the sea seems to flow in multiple directions at once. That night, you sleep in a guest house filled with the scent of incense and laundry. You lie awake, listening to the quiet shuffle of other travelers settling in. You think of the thread that brought you here, silk born in China, carried on camels, smuggled through empires, and now shining under Byzantine candlelight. You wonder where it goes next, because Constantinople may be the end of the road for some, but for others it's just another fork. You pull out the tiny poem from Samarkand. Read it again. I cannot carry silk or stone, nor walk from sea to sea. You smile. The Silk Road didn't end here. The morning in Constantinople begins not with birdsong, but with bells. Deep, rolling tolls that echo through the stone streets like someone striking a bronze gong beneath your pillow. You sit up groggily, wrap your scarf against the breeze blowing in from the Bosporus, and step outside into the city that never whispers today. You follow the scent of ink and conversation to the markets, but not for silk or scrolls. You're here to chase something less tangible, yet just as transformative. Ideas disguised as mathematics. You've heard the rumors about Arab merchants carrying not just spices and pearls, but numbers. Ideas. Systems. You want to find the men who count differently. It doesn't take long. In a shaded corner of a cloth market, you spot them. Traders in flowing white robes, surrounded not by goods but by slates and diagrams drawn in charcoal, you sit. You listen. They're arguing about numbers that cannot be expressed as fractions. One says infinity is a concept, not a number. Another draws a triangle and writes an unfamiliar script beside it. Hindi numerals. A boy nudges you. It's called algebra, he whispers. He says it makes trade easier. You blink. Algebra? You thought that was just for monks and headaches. Historians still debate how fast mathematical knowledge traveled along the Silk Road, but there's little question it did. What began in India moved westward through Baghdad, down to Cairo, and across into Europe, carried by traders who could calculate interest faster than most kings could issue edicts. One merchant shows you a chart. This, he says, tapping a symbol that looks like a curled tail, is zero. Powerful, yes. You nod slowly. It feels like a tiny hole punched in the universe, a hole through which logic flows. You spend the afternoon watching these traders at work. They haggle in Greek, Arabic, and Persian, but when it comes time to tally payments, they all switch languages to numbers. It's a universal tongue, one spoken fluently by money. You wander past a bookstall where Arabic texts are being translated into Latin by scribes with ink-stained fingers. One scroll contains optics theory, another, astronomy. A third is an early medical guide that claims a properly salted date can cure heartbreak. You buy that one, just in case. In a bathhouse courtyard, two men argue over whether Al-Khwarizmi or Euclid had better handwriting. Someone breaks the tension with a joke about irrational numbers. It's funnier than you expect. You meet a merchant named Yusuf who carries a tiny abacus in his sleeve like a secret weapon. He teaches you how to multiply faster than your own brain wants to believe. You try it once, twice, then give up and promise to just keep walking. As dusk approaches, you find yourself along the seawalls, staring out over the Golden Horn. The sky reflects like melted coin across the water. You're holding a page someone gave you earlier. A rough sketch of an astrolabe, notes scrawled in margins in both Arabic and Greek. You can't read most of it, but the drawings make sense in a quiet, mysterious way, like something you've always known but forgot how to say. The Silk Road is made of threads, yes, silk, spice, faith, and ink, but some of its threads are concepts. Invisible, weightless, capable of collapsing time and space into elegant little formulas. And like silk, these ideas shimmer when they catch the light just right. That night, you lie on a narrow cot in a spice trader's loft. You hear distant chants from a nearby monastery and the rhythmic swish of waves against stone. You think of zero again. How something can be empty and yet vital. You think of trade winds and number lines and a trail of symbols stretching backward to India, onward through Arabia, all the way to the cracked slates of schoolchildren in Paris who don't even know they owe their arithmetic to a camel's journey centuries ago. You close your eyes and fall asleep with the faint impression of symbols drifting through your mind like whispered equations. The road keeps moving. And now, it counts. You leave Constantinople with your pack a little heavier, not from goods, but from knowledge. A rolled-up diagram of a mechanical astrolabe, a folded manuscript of Arabic numerals, and the lingering feeling that numbers might be more powerful than swords. The road west is wide, but you take a different path today, not by foot, but by sea. You find yourself on the wooden deck of a dhow, its sails catching the morning breeze like the robe of a priest mid-sermon. This is the Sea Road, the oceanic sibling of the overland Silk Road. Just as ancient, just as influential, and infinitely wetter. Historians still argue whether maritime trade rivaled the land routes in reach and impact. Many say it surpassed them, threading together port cities from East Africa to South Asia and beyond. You squint into the sun and decide to let the sea answer that one. Your vessel cuts across the Aegean, then into the Levantine waters. The ship smells like salt, wet rope, and dried fish, with a hint of cloves that someone spilled near the cargo hold. The crew is a mix of sailors from Yemen, Egypt, and Cyprus. They argue over knots and sing in 5 dialects. No one seems to agree on where the stars are, but they always find where they're going. You drop anchor at Tyre, a port city bustling with more noise than air. Crates of cinnamon, ivory, pearls, and pepper line the docks. You step over fish, feathers, and at least one confused chicken. You've made landfall again, but the road has changed clothes. You meet a trader named Halim who sells nutmeg wrapped in palm leaves. He shows you a box stamped with Chinese characters. Java, he says proudly. Took me 9 months and for bribes. The Maritime Silk Road stretches not just west, but south and east, through the Indian Ocean, touching places your dusty boots never could. From Guangzhou to Calicut, from Mombasa to Malacca. And all along it, spices, ceramics, stories. You ride another ship, this one bound for Alexandria. Along the way, you stop at small ports, Crete, Rhodes, and Cyprus. Each island its own flavor, its own gods, its own dialect for how much is that? At one dock, you trade a bolt of silk for a carved ivory comb. At another, you sip tamarind wine and listen to a sailor describe the bioluminescent Bay of Sri Lanka like it's a myth that got bored and became real. You arrive in Alexandria under a sky so bright it hurts to blink. The lighthouse, what remains of it, still looms over the harbor like an old teacher who's seen everything twice. Here, you meet merchants from Ethiopia, India, Arabia, and even Venice. You walk through spice markets where the air itself tastes like clove and lemon zest. You see porcelain from Jingdezhen, so delicate it feels like moonlight baked into shape. One vendor fans herself with a Chinese silk fan, while bargaining in Greek about Malabar pepper that was grown a world away. And suddenly, the picture is clearer than ever. The Silk Road isn't a line, it's a net, and the Sea Road is one of its strongest threads. That evening, you sit by the water, watching ships pull out to sea with their cargo. Ceramics, amber, dried squid, bronze mirrors, and probably more. Books than anyone will ever read. A fisherman offers you grilled octopus and flatbread, which you accept without hesitation. It's chewy. It's wonderful. You swear the ink tasted better when it was on scrolls. You close your eyes and listen to the ocean. Somewhere, waves crash against coral reefs near Java. Somewhere else, a sailor is whispering to the stars in Sanskrit. The sea is a road too. No walls, no borders, just currents and courage. You sleep that night in a quiet guest house made of limestone and whispered prayers. You dream of boats carved from poetry, sails stitched from maps, and a world so connected it breathes with a single rhythm. The road hasn't ended, it's just gone liquid. You wake on a gently rocking cot, the sounds of gulls overhead and ropes straining against wooden masts reminding you you're still riding the sea. But not for long. You disembark in the Levant, where the dusty roads reappear and your sea legs wobble like overcooked noodles. The scent of the coast fades behind you as you rejoin the overland Silk Road, just in time for things to get fast. Because now you're entering Mongol territory, and everything is about to accelerate. Gone are the slow-paced caravans, the groaning camels, the endless bartering over dried figs. Under the Mongol Empire, the Silk Road becomes express delivery with arrows. Historians still argue whether Genghis Khan unified the Silk Road or just scared it into working better. But there's no debate about this. Pax Mongolica, the Mongol peace, transformed trade. You're walking a road now so well maintained, it feels like someone swept it with a golden broom. The relay stations appear every 20 or 30 miles. Simple outposts with fresh horses, rations, and beds for the tired but paid. You meet a courier racing past on a sweat-slick horse, wearing a sash marked with a yam seal, the badge of the Mongol imperial postal system. He doesn't stop. He just shouts something about a message for the Khan and disappears in a cloud of determination and dust. A local trader explains, they never sleep in the same bed twice. The message rides faster than war. You nod. Also, you definitely want one of those sashes. At the next station, a friendly guard lets you try on one of the messenger saddles. You immediately fall off the horse. Everyone applauds politely. You dust yourself off and move on. Along the stretch, the Silk Road isn't just faster, it's safer. Banditry? Low. Toll extortion? Rare. Disease? Still a problem, but we'll get there. For now, you walk with ease beneath Mongol banners flapping overhead. And it's not just the infrastructure. The Mongols brought uniform weights and measures, paper money, and, get this, passport systems. Official travelers carried tablets granting safe passage across vast distances. You see one at a merchant camp. Silver, inscribed with Mongol script. By the power of the Khan, It reads, "This man shall not be hindered." You want one. But instead, you settle for a rough copy on bark parchment and hope no one looks too closely. You spend a night at a caravanserai sponsored by the empire, where stories flow faster than the wine. A Persian scribe tells you he sent a letter from Samarkand to Tabriz in under 10 days. It arrived before my cousin even missed me. He boasts that a Mongol officer shares salted yak and speaks of maps drawn with horsehair brushes, showing every mountain pass and watering hole between the Yellow Sea and the Black Sea. You lie back, chewing jerky and imagining a world where a whisper from the east could reach Europe before the sunburn healed. Because in the Mongol era, this was no longer just a merchant trail. It was a superhighway. And for a while, just a while, it actually worked. The next day, you ride a borrowed horse for a few miles. It's bony, stubborn, and keeps trying to go backward, but it's still faster than walking. The wind rushes past your ears like history in fast forward. You pass a relay runner with scrolls strapped to their chest. Another man is carrying a jade figurine wrapped in velvet, destined for a prince in Aleppo. By Tuesday, he swears, that night, you sleep under stars so sharp they look carved. You're camped beside a man delivering falcons to the court of the great Khan. He lets one perch on your wrist. It stares into your soul. You ask what the delivery fee is. He shrugs. 1 falcon per promise. You give him a raisin. It seems fair. As you drift off, you think of how far the road has come. From footpaths in China to intercontinental infrastructure funded by horseback archers and ambition. And even as you close your eyes, the hooves keep echoing in your dreams. Because somewhere out there, another message is galloping through the night. And the road is wide open. You wake with the rising sun flickering through the flaps of your tent, golden light pooling like melted butter on your borrowed saddlebag. Somewhere nearby, a falcon screeches. The man delivering birds is already gone. You rub your eyes and remember today's destination. Karakoram? Xanadu? Maybe just wherever the road leads. But you're not alone. You've heard a name whispered in fireside stories, grumbled in marketplaces, and marveled at by Venetian travelers with sunburnt noses. Kublai Khan. Yes, that Kublai, grandson of Genghis, emperor of the Yuan dynasty, collector of everything shiny, strange, and strategic. And today you're riding toward his court, well, at least the idea of it. Historians still debate how much of the Silk Road's culture-shifting grandeur can be laid at Kublai's polished silken feet. Some call him a tyrant in brocade. Others, a visionary globalist with a surprisingly keen interest in spaghetti. More on that later. What no one disputes. His court was the nexus of the known world. As you ride past outposts flying the blue and white flag of the Yuan, the stories grow more outlandish. He has a summer palace made of marble and clouds, says one merchant. He keeps polar bears for entertainment, claims another. He employs 1,000 clerks, each trained in a different language, and none of them can agree on lunch. Eventually, you reach a settlement that pulses with anticipation. And there, beneath a silk awning larger than most villages, you spot a cluster of foreigners. Chinese scribes, Persian engineers, Arab astronomers, and, of course, a few lost-looking Europeans trying not to sweat through their tunics. And among them, a teenager with very nice boots. You know the name before he says it. Marco. He nods, adjusting the buckle on his travel pouch. Polo. You don't believe it at first, but he starts telling stories that even you haven't heard. Of cities built on water, of black stones that burn like wood, he means coal. Of palace couriers who drink fermented mare's milk and never sleep. You sit for hours, trading tales like currency. He tells you about a postal system that spans an empire, and you nod like you haven't just walked it. You tell him about the salt caravan that took 12 days to cross a desert and made you swear off lentils forever. He laughs, offers you a date. You accept. And then, as dusk falls, the court begins its procession. You don't see the Khan himself, only his banners, his guards, his elephants draped in brocade silk, and his falconers whose birds ride on gold-threaded gauntlets. You watch from the sidelines, the air thick with incense, dust, and the strange sense that you're standing in a moment that will echo for centuries. A man beside you mutters, "This road ends here." You shake your head. No, it bends. Because this court, for all its wealth, isn't a destination. It's a convergence point, a swirl of languages, ideas, patterns and contradictions. Silk next to steel. Scrolls beside saddles. Bowls of lamb stew eaten with chopsticks. You share one such bowl with Marco under the stars. He draws a map in the sand, marking places he wants to go next. You correct him on 3 of them. He raises an eyebrow. Have you walked the whole Silk Road? You smile. I'm walking it now. That night, you sleep on the edge of the Khan's shadow, the air soft with music from Persian flutes and Mongol throat singers. You dream of a world where emperors collect ideas instead of enemies, and trade routes are drawn not in blood, but in ink and curiosity. You dream of boots with strong soles, roads with no end, and a teenager from Venice who's going to change the way your world is remembered. Because sometimes history gallops, and sometimes it walks beside you with a notebook and very nice boots. You wake to the distant crackle of firewood and the soft clinking of armor plates. Sounds that should make you uneasy, but by now feel like the Silk Road whispering, "Keep moving." You stretch, fingers brushing sand, mind still thick with last night's dream of Marco Polo recounting how black rocks could boil water and how the Khan had more palaces than most people have shirts. You're not sure how much of it was true. But today, truth takes a darker turn. Because today you walk with gunpowder. And you realize, the Silk Road isn't just a road of beauty, poetry, and exotic fruit. It's also the tunnel through which power escapes. And sometimes that power explodes. The Chinese call it huiyao, or fire medicine. Originally developed for medicinal purposes, to extend life, soothe ailments, or possibly terrify ghosts. That didn't last long, because soon it became fire arrows, rockets, bombs. You pass a trader with black smudges on his sleeves and a cart carrying sealed bamboo tubes. You ask what's inside. He taps his nose. Spice, he says, grinning. You do not believe him. You walk beside him for a day and hear his story, how formulas leaked westward through scribes, soldiers, and monks, how the formula for gunpowder passed from court to court like a secret too loud to whisper. Historians still argue whether the knowledge traveled through printed manuals or through exiled alchemists who really should have kept their mouths shut. Either way, by the 13th century, the stuff is popping up everywhere from Baghdad to Bologna. You hear a tale in the next village. A Mongol siege that ended not with swords but with sound. Walls fell to thunderclaps in barrels. Soldiers fled before flames even reached them. One storyteller calls it dragon's breath. Another says it's the last mistake the East ever shared with the West. In a makeshift armory, you see a man assembling small copper grenades. He holds one out to you very gently. Don't drop it, he says deadpan. You very gently put it back down. Later, you meet a caravan carrying fire-laced scrolls. Texts warning about mixtures of sulfur, saltpeter, and charcoal. You peek into one and feel your eyebrows recoil from the formulas. In the next town, you hear a different kind of rumor. That gunpowder can make even weak armies loud, and that noise, properly timed, can buy fear cheaper than steel. You pass a burned-out watchtower, its stone blackened like bad bread crust. No one talks about it at night. The stars don't feel quite as peaceful. There's something in the air, a dry tension, like the moment before a storm or a spark. You camp beside a tinker who now makes signal flares instead of horseshoes. Quieter work, he says. Then winks. He offers you a drink that smells like kerosene and joy. You politely decline. As you lie under the stars, you think about how far the road has come. From the gentle hum of prayer beads and silk rustling in temple corridors, to the hiss of flame, the spark, the bang. The Silk Road brought not only poetry and pasta, but gunpowder, too. And that changes everything, because some ideas on this road build bridges. Others, they blow the doors open. The next morning greets you with a sharp wind and the strange sensation that the road beneath your feet feels different. You're walking through Europe now. Not the old dusty towns of Persia or the wild valleys of Central Asia, but the winding, cobbled lanes of cities with pointed rooftops, church bells, and an entirely new scent in the air: cheese, coal smoke, and the distant echo of Latin declensions. This is the West's end of the Silk Road, or rather, its continuation under another name. Here, people still talk about the East like it's a fable, but wear its fabrics and sip its spices like second nature. You step into a Venetian outpost, flags snapping above merchant houses that smell like wealth and moldy contracts. Ships creak at harbor, unloading boxes marked with Chinese characters. while men in fur-lined caps shout prices over piles of peppercorns. You meet a man named Carlo who wears a doublet sewn with gold thread, his belt pouch bulging with receipts. He's never been farther east than Istanbul, but his shop is filled with Persian rugs, Indian opium, and Chinese porcelain teacups he uses for soup. You don't need to walk the road, he says, sipping from a blue and white bowl. You just need to know where it ends. You try not to frown. Because you've walked it. You know the weight of silk in your pack, the sting of salt in your eyes, the rhythm of camels and coins and languages braided like rope. Carlo just knows the final price. You pass a bakery selling saffron buns, each golden and absurdly expensive. A woman with silver rings offers you a pastry filled with something she calls Oriental plum preserve. You recognize the flavor instantly. It came from a tree you napped under 2 months ago, and now it's gourmet. You wander the streets, spotting Eastern echoes in Western mouths. Teacups at noble banquets, turmeric rubbed on roast pork, ink made with Chinese soot copied into Latin medical texts. Historians still debate just how transformative the Silk Road was to Europe's rise. Some say it fueled the Renaissance, that the flow of knowledge, paper, and precious pigments from the East reignited the West's imagination. Others claim the impact was overstated, that Europe would have advanced anyway. You sip a cinnamon-laced wine and wonder if that's true. Then you watch a monk transcribe an Arabic astronomy text into French using ink from Persia, sitting on a cushion made in Samarkand, wearing a robe dyed with Indian indigo, and you decide. The road left its mark. You enter a university town, where dusty students debate whether zero is demonic, whether silk is effeminate, and whether Marco Polo made half of it up. You sit in a lecture hall and listen to a professor discuss Chinese compasses with such confidence you'd think he invented magnetism. He didn't. But he did get his hands on a scroll you recognize. You saw it once in Dunhuang, half-wrapped in prayer beads. Here it's bound in leather, and the margins are annotated in Latin. Progress wears new robes. That night, you're invited to a banquet. The food is rich, the wine is red, and the plates are porcelain, delicate, painted with cranes and pine trees. No one mentions they were once carried on the back of a donkey across 4,000 miles to one point. The host raises his glass and says, "To the ingenuity of Europe." You smile into your rice. Later, you stand on a balcony overlooking a moonlit harbor. The ships bob in their moorings. The stars above you are the same ones you saw over China, over Samarkand, over the ruins of Merv. You whisper a word in Chinese, then another in Arabic, then a third in Latin, and they all sound like travel. Because the Silk Road didn't just bring goods, it brought fusion. East and West no longer sit apart. They thread together, in languages, in recipes, in dreams. You sleep that night in a soft bed lined with wool from Spain and silk from Suzhou. And in your dream, the road is not a road at all. It's a loop. And you are walking it still. You wake in soft linen sheets to the sound of distant church bells and a pigeon aggressively pecking your windowsill. The walls of your room are stone, the air faintly damp, and you realize you're not in a tent, not in a caravanserai, not even in a spice-scented sailor's cot. You're in a house, a European one, and it's quiet, too quiet. You miss the chaos. But today you're headed somewhere even louder than a Mongol war drum, a printing press, because while silk, spice, and gunpowder crossed continents, there's another traveler, quieter at first, but destined to turn the world on its axis. Paper meets press. You head down the cobbled street to the workshop of a man named Johannes, whose hands are always ink-stained and whose eyes flicker like someone with too many ideas and not enough time. His shop is full of strange noises, levers groaning, gears spinning, pages slapping down like applause. On one wall hangs a sheet of paper the size of a goat, covered in tiny letters lined up like marching ants. He sees you gawking. "Move faster than the scribes," he says, "and you move faster than kings." You watch as he places movable metal letters into a wooden frame, one by one. He dips a wooden roller in ink, places a fresh sheet, cranks the press. And just like that, another page exists. Historians still argue whether Gutenberg's invention was the most important moment since fire, wheels, or soap. But what's certain is this: without paper from China, without ink recipes from Baghdad, without bookmaking traditions from the Arab world, there would be no Renaissance printing boom. The Silk Road didn't just carry scrolls.it carried the possibility of print. As the day rolls on, you help stack freshly printed pages, copies of religious texts, scientific theories, a curious flyer about a new kind of pasta machine. Everything smells like ink and excitement. A young boy reads one of the pages aloud. Carefully. He stumbles over a few words, then grins when he finishes. Faster than monks, he says proudly. In the back of the shop, you see a Chinese block-printed scroll, displayed like a relic. Gutenberg touches it reverently. From where it all began, he murmurs. You nod. Later, you walk the streets of the town, passing booksellers hawking pamphlets, priests fretting about heresies on paper, and poets staring at blank pages like they're mountains to climb. And everywhere, paper. Folded, stacked, scribbled on, printed. Paper that once had to be handmade by the inch in Samarkand, now spreading like wildfire. The Silk Road didn't just deliver material wealth. It delivered the template for revolution. A small inn. You sit beside a traveling scholar who clutches a sack of books to his chest like treasure. He shows you one, translated Arabic algebra, now printed in Latin. He speaks breathlessly of Leonardo Fibonacci, Al-Khwarizmi, and astronomy tables from Persia. You realize, as the candlelight flickers on the pages, that the East is now inside the West, not as invader or curiosity, but as foundation. You sleep in a loft above the printing press, lulled by the smell of ink and the faint creak of knowledge becoming mass-produced in your dreams. Books sprout like trees, their leaves covered in words from dozens of languages. Their roots stretching back to Dunhuang, Baghdad, Constantinople, Delhi. And when the wind blows, it smells like ink. The morning breaks with a smell you know well now. Ink, baked bread, and the crisp bite of new pages drying by a window. You descend from the printing loft with aching knees and an odd hunger. Not just for breakfast, but for more movement. You've watched the Silk Road carry goods, gods, and gunpowder. Now it's time to follow something far stickier. Culture. You wander into a town square buzzing with energy. Market stalls sell everything from Italian olive oil to Indian spices, from Persian carpets to Chinese porcelain repainted with Christian saints. You blink. A familiar blue and white dragon design now features St. George riding it. Adaptation at its finest. You step into a tailor's shop. He's threading Japanese silk with Venetian beads, humming a tune from Andalusia. On the wall behind him, a tapestry woven with Buddhist cloud motifs, but stitched with Latin prayers. This is no accident. This is fusion, and it's everywhere. In the corner, a lute player plucks out a melody that starts like a Mongol folk tune and ends like a troubadour's lament. A merchant nearby grumbles that his daughter is now studying Arabic geometry for fun. She says it helps with painting. He sighs. I blame the books. You smile. Historians still argue how much cultural exchange was intentional versus inevitable. Did artists copy Eastern styles because they admired them, or because they sold better at royal courts? You pass a potter crafting ceramics in Tang shapes, but glazing them in Italian green. Best of both. She shrugs. You find a cookbook being copied by hand. One side, Persian pilaf with dried fruit and lamb. The other, Italian risotto. Same rice, different rhythm. That's the secret of this late-stage Silk Road. It's no longer a line from east to west. It's a weave, a pattern that repeats, reflects, reinvents. You sit down at a tavern where a trio of dancers perform to music played on a Chinese eru, an Arab oud, and a European recorder. Somehow it works. The crowd claps in 3 different time signatures. Your stew arrives, cinnamon-spiced chickpeas over mashed turnips, and you wonder what continent it's from. You give up and just eat. It's delicious. That night, you're invited to a wedding feast. The bride wears a dress embroidered with Byzantine, Persian, and Mughal motifs, and a necklace of amber from the Baltic strung beside jade from Xinjiang. She raises a cup of rosewater punch, and someone toasts in Greek, then Arabic, then French. You think of that moment years ago when you sat on a rock in Central Asia and shared tea with a stranger who didn't speak your language. You think of the scroll in your bag, the bead on your wrist, the stories you've absorbed without even realizing. The Silk Road didn't just move objects.it moved aesthetics.it taught cultures how to borrow, remix, and admire. And whether by camel or cargo ship, it taught people how to listen with their eyes. You fall asleep in a room painted with Arabic calligraphy, Greek columns, and a mural of a Buddhist stupa nestled in Italian hills. None of it matches. All of it fits, and you smile in your sleep because you realize something very quietly profound. The Silk Road didn't just connect civilizations, it helped them dream in shared colors. You rise with the scent of incense, the rustle of prayer beads, and the low murmur of half-sung scripture drifting through the window. Outside, the streets are still damp from a light dawn rain. The cobblestones glisten like lacquered stone. Today you follow a different kind of path, one not marked by maps, but by memory. Because while goods and ideas have traveled the Silk Road, there's something even more haunting that's come along for the ride. Stories. Not recorded ones. Not the kind scribes write down. These are the ones whispered between breaths. Mutated. Repeated. Glowing faintly, like embers that never die out. You meet a woman weaving tales into cloth. Literally. Her tapestry is stitched with threads of red and silver, depicting a caravan haunted by a fox spirit who guides traders to safety. Unless they cheat their partners. She smiles. Everyone knows that one. You pass a spice vendor who insists his nutmeg came from a village cursed to always smell like cinnamon. The monkeys there wear jewelry, he adds. You believe half of it. Which half? You're not sure. These tales stretch from the Arabian sands to Chinese mountains to Italian vineyards, and they don't travel alone. They ride on merchants, disguised in laughter, sold like trinkets in a small theater. Children act out the tale of a Persian prince who trades his kingdom for a bolt of magical silk that changes color with the truth. The audience gasps when the fabric turns black in his hands. A man beside you leans over. It's about taxes. Everyone knows that. You nod, even though you're lost in the detail, the shape of the clouds in the painted backdrop, the way the props are carved from bamboo and painted with Greek vines. This isn't just storytelling. It's cultural smuggling. Historians still argue how many myths and fables migrated via the Silk Road. Was Sinbad just an Arab spin on an Indian sailor? Did dragons fly westward from Chinese legends, picking up scales and wings as they went? You don't need consensus. You just need the way a child looks when a story turns. That afternoon, you rest in a square where a bard plays a rebab and sings of a city made entirely of mirrors, built to trap a demon in his own reflection. You offer him a figure. He nods, changes tunes, and begins a tale about a Mongol general who turned into a raven and now steals coins from greedy traders. You lie back on a stone bench and listen to the wind carry these stories, imagining how they folded into different languages, morphed to match different beliefs, and sometimes stitched themselves into memory with no known origin. Later, in a tavern lined with tapestries, someone tells you the story of a Chinese monk who traded his shadow for safe passage across the desert, and how his shadow now walks alone, appearing in moonlight whenever a traveler gets lost. You think of shadows you've seen that didn't belong to anyone. You decide not to say anything. Before bed, you pull out a scroll from your pack, the one from Samarkand with the soft ink poem, and realize it's been rubbing off slowly, becoming something else with time. You decide not to read it tonight. Some stories don't want to be remembered too clearly. You sleep in a room with no windows, the air heavy with rosemary and wood smoke, the silence stitched with dreams that don't belong to you. You dream of foxes that talk, camels that weep, cities that disappear after sunrise. And in the distance, you hear someone whisper, "It doesn't matter if it's true. It matters that it traveled." You wake before dawn to silence so thick it feels padded. For a moment, you're unsure where you are, until the faint glow of oil lamps and the musty scent of parchment and plaster gently orient you. You're in a monastery this time, somewhere tucked into the folds of the Alps. A waypoint where travelers speak in hushed tones and sleep is considered sacred labor. You rise slowly. Today, your path curves not through cities or marketplaces but through something much quieter. Medicine. The kind brewed in jars, scribbled in Latin, whispered between scholars and tested reluctantly. On sheep. In the dim hallway, you pass a monk grinding myrrh resin with a mortar shaped like a lion's head. He nods at you and mutters, "For toothaches." You nod back solemnly, rubbing your own jaw just in case. You enter the scriptorium where two scribes are copying a Byzantine medical treatise. The original is written in Greek, the copy in Latin. A margin note includes a recipe for curing melancholy involving rose oil, cardamom, and exactly 7 minutes of flute music. Seems worth a try. One monk murmurs on a high shelf. You see Arabic texts, carefully preserved. From Baghdad, the librarian says proudly, brought back by students. Some formulas here. They're older than our walls. And just like that, the picture sharpens. Because along with goods and gods and stories, the Silk Road carried remedies, powders, roots, prescriptions, and above all, ideas about the body, the soul, and the strange interactions between the two. Historians still debate how much of modern European medicine owes to Greek revival or to Arabic transmission. But here, in this candlelit room, surrounded by clove-scented parchment and coughs too delicate to be acted upon, the answer is clear. Both. Later, you visit the monastery's herb garden. Meticulously arranged rows of wormwood, lavender, saffron, and licorice root. A young apprentice explains how they categorize the herbs. By taste, not by country. Sweet, bitter, hot, damp. It makes sense in a world where borders shift, but honey remains honey. You taste a syrup made from pomegranate peel and white pepper, supposedly good for digestion and betrayal. You're not sure which part it's targeting to end the infirmary. A monk wraps the leg of a traveler who swears he was kicked by a Venetian mule, possessed by a demon. The monk says nothing, applies a poultice that smells like vinegar and mystery, and hums a Mongol lullaby under his breath in a quiet alcove. You flip through a tattered manuscript that describes diseases by color, black bile, red fever, yellow wind, and diagrams showing how illnesses travel by air, water, and sometimes bad dreams. It's not always scientific, but it's always human. And that's the truth you carry with you as you leave the monastery. That the Silk Road didn't just bring treatments, it brought philosophies of healing from Ayurveda to Galen, from Chinese pulse reading to Persian compound tonics. The road ferried the hope that something, anything, might work that night. In a valley lined with dried herbs and firewood stacked like scrolls, you sleep on a cot padded with wool and rosemary leaves. You dream of a doctor riding a camel across the desert, humming softly, his satchel full of clinking vials and wrinkled instructions translated 5 times too many. You dream of a girl in Damascus brewing tea for a homesick merchant, of a monk in Rome copying down a cure for coughs using saffron and cinnamon bark, of someone somewhere believing again. You wake mouth dry, heart full. The Silk Road didn't just trade in goods or gods. It traded in healing. And some of that healing still lingers in books, in gardens, in recipes. And maybe, just maybe, in you. You wake to bells ringing low and slow across the valley. Not church bells. Not warning bells. These are market bells, strung from wooden frames at the town square, meant to let traders know it's time to open their stalls. And just like that, you're back where the Silk Road shines brightest. In the middle of commerce and everything that clings to it. But this time, it's fashion. You step into a cobbled plaza already humming with the day's first negotiations. Bolts of fabric are being unfurled like treasure maps. Damask from Damascus, satin from Suzhou, muslin from Mosul. Their names alone a history lesson. A young tailor sees you admiring a Turkish tulip print robe and says, "That's Ottoman, but made with Persian dyes, stitched in Florence, and styled after a Mongol riding coat." You blink. She grins. "We call it spring collection." Historians still debate when the Silk Road's impact on fashion peaked. Some say it was with the introduction of sericulture to Byzantium. Others argue for the Ottoman textile boom, or the moment when European nobles started layering themselves in Indian cotton undergarments because wool was simply rude. What's clear is that fashion, like trade itself, was always cross-stitched. Ideas sewn together from lands that couldn't pronounce each other's names. You pass a merchant selling kimonos reworked into Venetian cloaks, embroidered slippers with Arabic calligraphy, and hats shaped like Mongol helmets but decorated with French feathers. Everything's been translated in a nearby atelier. You see dyers boiling indigo, their fingers stained like midnight. Imported from Gujarat, one says, holding up a swatch. The blue has to sting your skin a little, or it's not real. You watch a weaver threading gold wire through silk. "For a bishop," he whispers. "They always want dragons now. Do you know where that started?" You nod. "China." He smiles. "Thought so. By midday, the square turns into a runway of its own. Pilgrims in patchwork robes, princesses in pearl-studded veils, merchants in doublets that shimmer with dye from 8 countries. Even the camels look fashionable. One's wearing a necklace of bells shaped like pine cones. You buy a scarf dyed with pomegranate, saffron, and walnut husks, and wear it like a local. Someone compliments it in Greek. You thank them in Persian. Neither of you seems to notice. Later, you sip spiced wine while listening to a lecture by a tailor who swears that buttons were invented in Central Asia, but made fabulous in France. She gestures dramatically with a silk fan from Korea and adds, "And zippers are just sorcery." That evening, in a candlelit hall full of draped curtains and mirrored walls, you attend a gathering hosted by a textile guild. There's music, there's dancing, and there's a man from Andalusia wearing a jacket lined with Chinese brocade, so fine it glows. He spins and says, "Is it fashion, or is it diplomacy?" You answer, "Both," because on the Silk Road, what you wore was never just about whether it was language, status, protection, temptation, tribute again, and sometimes survival. That night, you lie under a quilt filled with scraps from 3 continents and patterns that don't belong together, yet fit perfectly. You drift off imagining what your own road-worn clothes look like now. Frayed at the sleeves, patched with Uzbek cotton, dyed with tea and regret. Beautiful in their own stubborn way, you smile half asleep. Because somewhere out there, a weaver is copying your look. The Silk Road didn't just change what people wore. It made fashion global before global was even a word. You wake beneath that patchwork quilt with sunlight slipping through latticed windows, casting patterns like silk onto the floor. You roll over and hear the rustle of fabric, your scarf, now slightly crumpled, still fragrant with smoke and dye. Today, the road winds somewhere quieter, more reflective today. You follow the Silk Road to its most invisible cargo, time. Not hours and minutes, but calendars, constellations, and the sky as a clock. You join a procession leaving the city. A group of scholars, travelers, and one very smug-looking camel loaded with telescopes. They're headed to a nearby observatory. Built by Arab mathematicians, restored by Persian patrons, now used by Italian monks. Your companion explains. Everyone gets a turn at the stars. As you climb a ridge, the air thins and sharpens. The chatter fades. At the summit, stone walls rise from the hillside. A ring of arches, domes, and sundials worn smooth by time itself. Inside, the floor is a mosaic of the zodiac, rendered in crushed lapis and mother of pearl. A scholar kneels beside a bronze armillary sphere, adjusting its rings to track a planet you can't name. He sees you. Time, he says, tapping the sphere, moves east to west, just like you. You walk through halls lined with star charts in Arabic, Greek annotations, and a mural of Chinese lunar phases. A boy points to one. "This is when the traders arrive," he says. "The moon tells them." You're beginning to understand. Historians still argue which cultures influenced whose astronomy first, whether the Chinese were first to map comets or the Babylonians or the Mayans. But on the Silk Road, time wasn't owned. It was shared. Outside, an older woman shows you a clepsydra, a water clock dripping steadily into a carved bowl. Each drop lands with a soft plink, a whisper that centuries have been measured this way. You sit beside her and sip sour yogurt with mint, staring at the horizon. The wind picks up. The sun glints off a brass sextant. Someone nearby draws a calendar wheel in the dirt, Zoroastrian months, annotated with Chinese harvest festivals, rimmed with Byzantine feast days. It doesn't matter that they overlap or contradict. Time out here is a circle, not a line at in the afternoon. You visit a man who calls himself a timekeeper. He doesn't wear a watch. He wears a robe embroidered with astrological signs, lunar diagrams, and an eagle stitched from black thread, Scorpio rising. He says, nodding gravely, that he offers to read your birth chart. You accept. He tells you you're most compatible with fire and camels, and that your destiny involves long roads, ancient texts, and bad knees. You believe every word. That evening, you help set up a quadrant to track stars. The scholar guiding you explains how navigation, agriculture, and festivals were all tied to what the heavens were doing. The stars, he says, are our receipts. As night falls, the sky clears to a velvet depth that defies belief. You lie on your back atop the observatory roof, surrounded by hushed figures all watching time unfold in pinpricks of light. Someone sings softly. An old Sogdian lullaby at a monk hums a harmony, and you realize. The Silk Road didn't just move through land that IT moved through the stars that IT gave people across continents a shared sky, a shared rhythm, a reason to look up, even when the world below was dust and trade and tired feet. You fall asleep under that sky, heart beating to an ancient cosmic pulse, dreams full of rotating spheres and bronze dials. The road keeps moving, so do the stars. And you're learning to move with both. You wake on the observatory roof with a stiff neck and a vague suspicion that you dreamt in constellations. Orion might have offered you tea. You're not sure. The stars are gone now, replaced by soft cloud light and the low drone of morning chants drifting up from the valley below. You rub your eyes and begin the descent. Today, you're headed somewhere most people never think to go on the Silk Road. The kitchen. Because while empires rise and scholars argue about planetary motion, someone, somewhere, still has to boil the rice. You arrive in a mountain town shaped like a ladle, narrow, curved, full of smoke rising from clay chimneys. The smell hits you before you even cross the first gate. Ginger, lamb, mint, fermented garlic, and hope. You follow it. Straight into the courtyard of a caravanserai kitchen, where the chef doesn't look up but immediately thrusts a bowl of stewed lentils and sumac into your hands. You look hungry, he says. You also look like you'll faint if I ask questions. You eat. He's not wrong. A woman nearby is roasting flatbread on a hot stone, flipping it with fingers made of fire and muscle memory. Uyghur recipe, she tells you. But we use Armenian flour. It holds better. And just like that, you're in it. The Silk Road's most underrated masterpiece. Fusion cuisine, centuries before anyone branded it. You try a slice of lamb stuffed with pistachios and ginger, then rice dumplings flavored with fennel and tamarind, wrapped in lotus leaves. Each dish is a sentence in a language you've never heard, but somehow understand. Historians still argue which foods originated where. Was pasta Italian or Chinese? Did coffee come from Ethiopia or Yemen? Who first combined sugar and almonds and called it dessert? The Silk Road doesn't care that IT just keeps cooking in the next kitchen stall. Someone grinds cumin and dried rose petals, mixing them into a sauce that tastes like poetry written in turmeric. He calls it a meditation blend. You believe it. Children pass around skewers of honey-glazed lamb, licking fingers and arguing over whose grandmother invented it. One girl swears hers once cooked for Genghis Khan. He asked for seconds, she says proudly. You join a spice vendor for tea. He mixes cardamom, cinnamon, black pepper, and orange peel, then throws in something unidentifiable but magical. It's from somewhere near Malacca, he shrugs. Don't ask more. You take a sip. Your toes wiggle involuntarily. You say nothing. Later, a monk shows you his recipe scroll, not religious texts, but instructions on how to make medicinal broth with cumin, dried apricot, and oxbone, copied from a Persian healer who got it from an Indian monk who once stayed at a Chinese temple. You help grind spices for dinner, your hands stained saffron yellow for the next 2 days. That night, there's a feast. Not a royal affair. Just travelers, locals, and a table that sags with biryani, pilaf, noodles, stews, fermented bean cakes, and at least one dish that everyone agrees is suspicious but too delicious to ignore. You eat until your belt feels theoretical. A scholar beside you smiles. This road, she says, holding up a stuffed fig, did more for the kitchen than it ever did for the throne. You nod, then grab another fig.s. The fire crackles and someone begins plucking a stringed instrument shaped like a gourd. You lie back on a wool mat, full to the soul. And you realize, taste travels better than power. Silk wears out. Spices dry up. Empires crumble. But recipes, they migrate. They adapt. They survive. And tomorrow, somewhere else, someone will boil rice with cinnamon and not know why. But you'll know. Because the Silk Road fed more than hunger. It fed curiosity. And tonight, that's enough. You wake with the weight of saffron still lingering in your breath. Your dreams full of cardamom and laughter echoing down stone alleys. You stretch, vaguely aware that your cloak now smells like cumin. You don't mind. Today, the road veers once again, not forward, but inward, because as much as the Silk Road traded silks and stories and stews, it also traded identity. You begin the day in a courtyard where two painters sit cross-legged, carefully copying a Chinese lotus blossom onto a Persian manuscript border. He does flowers, one says, pointing to the other. I do birds. He smiles. Sometimes, we argue over clouds. You look at the painting. The clouds are Mongol. The scroll is Arabic. The style? Renaissance adjacent. None of it belongs. All of it fits. Identity on the Silk Road is fluid, layered, beautifully inconvenient. In a bathhouse down the road, you sit beside a man from Samarkand who prays like a Christian, eats like a Persian, and wears Italian boots. He speaks 6 languages and swears in 3. I don't have a homeland, he says, rinsing soap from his beard. I have a route. You nod. You understand. You walk through a textile market where a young girl embroiders her name, in Arabic script, onto a Japanese-style robe, while humming a tune she learned from a Sufi traveler. She's 10. She already knows more about cultural exchange than most governments. You visit a sculptor who uses Greek marble to carve Buddhist bodhisattvas with Uzbek cheekbones, and when asked why, shrugs. Because that's how I see the world. Historians still debate the concept of identity along the Silk Road. Was there cultural theft? Appropriation? Assimilation? Syncretism? The road doesn't bother with labels. It simply absorbs. You find a musician playing a hybrid instrument, a body shaped like a pipa, with the strings of a lyre tuned to a Persian scale. The melody starts in Baghdad, waltzes through Bokhara, and ends somewhere near Naples. Nobody knows what it's called. Everyone claps anyway. In a bookshop, you find a folio where Confucian wisdom is annotated by a Syrian monk in Latin. The handwriting wobbles. You imagine him trying to understand filial piety between sips of barley wine. Later, you share a meal with a family whose name changes depending on which city they're in. Too dangerous to keep one name, the father says. Too confusing to keep changing. He laughs and passes you a bowl of apricot stew. So we just answer to kindness. That night, you sit under a tree with bark peeled in swirling patterns. Names and dates etched by travelers, some faded, some recent. You trace a few with your fingertips. One is in Sanskrit, another in Cyrillic. A third just says, here, I became someone. You get it. Because the Silk Road isn't just a path for movement, it's a mirror point, one that shows you not who you are, but how many versions of you there can be. Merchant, monk, poet, listener. You fall asleep on a terrace lit by oil lamps and a sliver of moon, the air cool and clear. You dream of masks that change shape when worn with kindness, of names passed down like heirlooms, of languages that collide and turn into lullabies. The Silk Road didn't just change borders, it changed selves, and sometimes, that's the most beautiful trade of all. You wake slowly the final morning. The sun glows soft through a silk-curtained window, and for the first time in what feels like forever, there's no pressing destination, no caravan to catch, no incense-scented urgency. Just the hush of a city waking gently, and you, wrapped in layers of dust, memory, and everything you've carried. Today is not about movement, it's about looking back. You walk quiet streets paved in the footprints of traders, monks, nomads, and dreamers. The walls around you were fragments of their presence. Graffiti scratched in Persian, weathered tiles from Bokhara, iron rings once used to tether camels who carried everything from gunpowder to gossip. You pass a group of children playing a game that involves drawing maps in chalk, then arguing about where the dragons start. One child insists they live past Samarkand. Another says, dragons are just misunderstood cloud spirits. You smile. You've met both kinds. Further down, a traveler plays a stringed instrument you still don't know the name of. You pause, toss a coin, and he nods as if to say, you've come far, but not far enough to stop listening. You sit beside a dried-up fountain once fed by mountain snowmelt. Now, it holds only dust and a few leftover flower petals from someone's prayer. You think of the road as it was when you started: hot sand, cold mountains, stone alleys, paper scrolls, spiced tea, bone-rattling laughter, quiet grief, and you who walked it all. Across the steppes of Mongolia, the jade gates of China, the candlelit libraries of Persia, and the harbor cries of the Mediterranean, historians still argue what the Silk Road really was. A trade network? A political experiment? An accident of geography? But as you watch the light shift through your tea glass, you know the truth. The Silk Road was a rhythm, a heartbeat that spanned empires, stitched languages together, kneaded belief into bread, spun memory into thread. It was carried in saddle packs, scroll margins, flute notes, and recipes whispered across campfires. And now it's part of you. Not just in your worn boots or your ink-stained pack, but in your perspective, in the way you notice spices, in how you trace the stars at night and wonder who else is looking. You return to your room one last time. Roll up your scarf. Tuck the bead pouch into a side pocket. Fold the poem from Samarkand, now nearly unreadable. Its ink faded, but its meaning etched permanently into you. You leave a small coin on the windowsill. A habit now, a gesture, a thank you to the space that sheltered your dreams. And you step outside, not for another leg of the journey, but for the long, quiet return. Because even the Silk Road circles home. Not with noise, not with fanfare, but with everything you've gathered along the way. And as the city exhales around you, and the world shifts into motion once more, you realize, you never walked the Silk Road. You became it. So now, let the road soften. Let your breath slow. Let your mind drift gently through the landscapes we've walked together. Golden deserts rippling under silk banners, pine forests echoing with caravan bells, star-mapped skies you traced with tired fingertips. The world is quieter now. The trades are done. The fire has burned low, and only embers remain, soft and glowing, like the memory of saffron on your tongue or the weight of a story whispered before sleep. There's no need to remember every step, every name, every turning point. Just know that somewhere, the road continues. And every time someone sips cardamom tea, hums a borrowed melody, or ties a scarf without thinking where the pattern began, they are walking it, too, tonight, as you lie still, wrapped in the hush of night and the soft rustle of distant maps. Give yourself permission to let go. Of the noise, of the movement, of even the stories. For just a moment, you've carried enough. The Silk Road can rest now. In you, so close your eyes. Let the dust settle, and let the stars guide you one last time.